Okay, I'm going to talk about DC again, but I promise I'm not going to yell this time. So a couple of things have happened in regards to Warner Brothers and DC Comics related movies. The first one, the big news, is that Matt Reeves, after having been in talks, then leaving talks, apparently because things got heated, and now has apparently come back and is signed, confirmed to direct The Batman. And actually, this is the first bit of news to come out in relation to DC movies that gives me a little bit of hope. Not so much in that I'm putting that much faith in Matt Reeves specifically. I like him as a director, and I hope he does well. But I mean, it's not like he's going to single-handedly just revive the thing for me. But here's what gives me some hope. When he had left talks, the report and the word was that he had left because things got heated and maybe come back, quote unquote, when cooler heads prevailed, or something along those lines. Now, that says that things just, things got passionate, which is, I mean, it's good to have someone who's passionate. But what it says to me, the fact that he's now signed, that means somebody blinked, because initially he left talks, and that means he and Warner Brothers weren't seeing eye to eye, and they had to step away. If they're now in an agreement, somebody caved and somebody gave into the other side. And if I were to guess, it's probably Warner Brothers. Because simply put, Matt Reeves, on the heat that he's getting off of the Apes movies, and War of the Planet of the Apes looks great, so I don't expect that heat to die down. He doesn't need this gig. So if he feels it's not worth it for him to do it, he would just walk. So that to me says if he's back and signed, that Warner Brothers were the ones that gave into whatever his demands were. Now, I have no way of knowing what those demands were, but I would suspect it would be, if not final cut, at least some guarantee that the movie would not be completely taken out of his hands at any point. Now, if Warner Brothers is willing to make those kinds of capitulations, that to me is a good sign. It's not a complete 180 from the kind of management just mess that I think they've been doing up to this point, but it's a step in a correct direction that is in the interest of the finished product, not just the interest of the bottom line. And that is a change from what we normally see Warner Brothers doing, and that is a good thing. Again, I'm not doing a 180 on my stance on Warner Brothers and everything else, but I am going to say, you know what? Gives me a little bit of hope. Now, the other big Batman-related news is that Chris McKay is apparently, I think he's still in talks, at least at the time I'm recording this, to direct a Nightwing movie. Now, Chris McKay directing it is a choice that both makes sense and is weird. It makes sense in standard sort of studio progressing somebody up the ranks logic. He just directed Lego Batman for them. Lego Batman has done very well received, well reviewed, made tons of money, and so they're like, we want you to keep doing stuff with us. Here's another project for you. But I mean, Chris McKay's an animation guy, and a comedy animation guy at that, so to put him on Nightwing is slightly odd. It would seem to indicate that maybe they're willing to lighten up the world, and that if they did Nightwing, it would be of a lighter tone. That's supposition on my part. Maybe Chris McKay has a darker story that he wants to tell. I mean, heck, Jordan Peele's known as a comedy guy in Get Out. Yeah. So I don't want to jump too much on what it says about the tone of Nightwing, but I mean, I like Chris McKay's work. Where it strikes me as odd is the idea of a Nightwing movie for a character who hasn't been introduced yet. And I'm not saying that they have to seed characters who are going to get their own movies somewhere else first, but Nightwing is so intrinsically tied to Batman. The idea that they are going forward on a Nightwing project when we don't even know if Nightwing is going to appear in the Batman solo movie just strikes me as weird. And the other thing that's weird about doing a Nightwing movie is the movies, and honestly, not just the movies, but the movies most glaringly really seem to have gone out of their way to avoid Robin at all costs. There's been, and like I said, it's not restricted to the movies, really since about the mid-'80s. Almost everything Batman related has gone out of its way to minimize Robin, unless they feel they really want him for specific stories, with things like Damian Wayne, who Grant Morrison obviously had a very specific plan in mind for that character. But by and large, even when Damian Wayne was around, most of the Batman comics that I read, he was going solo. The idea of Batman as this loner is really sort of that's the image they push at this point. And the kid running around in the yellow, green, red, people think it's goofy, and it is to a certain extent, but Batman was originally for kids, but Robin is an aspect that they've really kind of shunted off to the side, and it concerns me slightly that they would jump to Nightwing without having done Robin. And this sort of also speaks to my feelings about people have been calling for the Under the Red Hood storyline. And I'm not the biggest fan of that storyline in the first place, but I really don't want to see it in live action if we don't have some context for it, if we haven't actually seen a Robin. Like the idea that anything related to Robin was just a backstory that we're never going to actually see, that's going to take a lot of the weight out of the proceedings with anything that you're going to, where the character is rooted in having been Robin at some point, whether it's related to the Red Hood storyline or it's related to Nightwing or any of that other stuff. But it's early days, and maybe there's a plan. I don't know. I'm still skeptical of Warner Brothers on the whole. But like I said, the fact that Matt Reeves is signed, that's the first indication. I'm like, okay, it's a step in the right direction. So I'm not going to go like, it doesn't matter. No, it does matter. That's a step in the right direction. And it gives me a little bit of hope for that specific project. It doesn't alter my feelings and my concerns about Wonder Woman or Justice League or The Flash or any of the stuff that's already been cooking away. But it may, fingers crossed, point to further down the line, maybe they're getting some corrective measures laid out, as opposed to flying by the seat of their pants and trying to fix things in the middle of production like they did with Suicide Squad. So that's my thoughts on the latest news to come out in relation to DC movies, Batman specifically. What are your thoughts on Matt Reeves being confirmed? What are your thoughts on a Nightwing movie? What kind of storyline would you like to see Nightwing be involved in if he were to be given a solo movie? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check me out on Twitter at Council of Geeks. Check out the Council of Geeks podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. And until next time, this council is adjourned.